You ever notice those workplace rules that sound brilliant in a meeting but completely fall apart the moment real customers get involved? My company decided that sitting during a shift made employees look lazy. So they banned every chair, stool, and seat from the customer floor. Management thought standing all day would make us look more energetic. Instead, customers started walking out. Not because of bad service. Not because of high prices. Because they couldn't find anyone who was physically capable of helping them. And by the time the company realized what had happened, they had already lost one of the biggest sales contracts of the year. I never argued with the rule. I followed it exactly. Every single day. My name is Daniel, and at the time, I worked as a senior sales specialist at a large home improvement store outside Columbus, Ohio. I'd been there almost 6 years. Long enough to know the products. Long enough to know the customers. And definitely long enough to know that every decision made at corporate headquarters looked brilliant on paper and completely ridiculous inside an actual store. Most of us liked the job. It wasn't perfect. Retail never is. But our store manager, Mike, was reasonable. If business was slow, nobody cared if you leaned against a counter for a minute. If your knees hurt after helping customers load heavy appliances, you could sit on the small stool behind the service desk while you finished your paperwork. Nobody abused it. In fact, customers usually appreciated seeing real people instead of exhausted robots pretending to smile. Our team worked well together. There was Lisa at customer service. Carlos in appliances. Emily handled flooring. Jordan worked lumber. And then there was me. Most of my day involved helping customers compare expensive equipment. Generators. Power tools. Outdoor furniture. Kitchen remodel packages. Those conversations weren't quick. Some lasted 30 or 40 minutes. Customers wanted advice. They wanted someone patient enough to explain the differences between products. Sometimes elderly couples needed extra time. Sometimes contractors brought blueprints. Sometimes first-time homeowners had absolutely no idea what they needed. That was fine. Helping people was actually the part of the job I enjoyed. If they trusted you, they came back. And repeat customers spent serious money. Our numbers proved it. The store consistently ranked near the top of our district. Customer satisfaction scores stayed above 95%. Employee turnover was surprisingly low. Even district managers liked visiting us because they knew the store practically ran itself. Which probably explains why corporate decided we needed fixing. It started with an email. The subject line sounded harmless. Creating a more professional customer experience. Whenever corporate used words like professional experience, everyone quietly braced for something inconvenient. Mike printed the memo and called a meeting before we opened. About 30 employees stood in the break room holding coffee cups. Mike looked uncomfortable before he even started reading. That was unusual. Normally he defended company decisions. This time, he didn't even try. He cleared his throat. Corporate completed a visual productivity audit across multiple locations. Nobody knew what that meant. He kept reading. The audit determined that employees sitting while visible to customers creates the impression of poor service and low motivation. Carlos whispered beside me. Here we go. Mike continued. Effective immediately, chairs, stools, and any other seating will be removed from all customer-accessible work areas. The room went completely silent. Then Emily raised her hand. Even the service desk Mike nodded. Everything. Lisa frowned. What about when we're answering emails or processing returns that take 20 minutes? Mike looked down at the paper. Standing. Jordan laughed because he thought it was a joke. Nobody else laughed. One employee asked, "What if someone has a medical condition?" Mike sighed. Reasonable accommodations have to be approved through HR. That sounded simple. It wasn't. Getting HR approval usually took weeks. Sometimes months. Carlos crossed his arms. So we're expected to stand for 8 or 9 hours every day? Mike hesitated before answering. That's the policy. Nobody liked the answer. But nobody argued either. Retail employees learn something very quickly. Arguing with corporate almost never changes corporate. The meeting ended. Maintenance workers came in before the store opened. Within 30 minutes, every stool disappeared. Every chair vanished. Even the small seat behind customer service that had been there for nearly 15 years was gone. The store suddenly looked strange. Almost empty. Customers probably never noticed the missing furniture. Employees noticed immediately. The first couple of hours weren't terrible. Everyone joked about it. Carlos pretended to salute every time he walked past the empty service desk. Lisa said she was going to frame a picture of her old chair. Even Mike tried to smile. But around 11 that morning, the jokes stopped. Because standing still hurts a lot more than walking. And our jobs involved plenty of standing. Waiting for customers. Looking up inventory. Processing paperwork. Answering warranty questions. All the little tasks that used to take 5 minutes while sitting now became 10 uncomfortable minutes on aching feet. By lunchtime, people started shifting their weight from one leg to the other. Emily quietly stretched her back whenever nobody was looking. Jordan rubbed his knees. Lisa took painkillers with her sandwich. Nobody complained out loud. Not yet. After all, corporate wanted standing. So standing was exactly what they were going to get. None of us realized that the very first customer to notice the new policy would accidentally expose just how badly corporate had misunderstood what actually happens inside a real store. And that conversation would change everything. The next morning started exactly the same. No chairs. No stools. No exceptions. It was amazing how quickly something so small changed the atmosphere of the entire store. People weren't talking as much. Smiles disappeared faster. Even before lunch, everyone already looked tired. Mike walked the floor carrying a clipboard. He wasn't checking on us. He was making sure nobody had quietly found somewhere to sit. I almost felt bad for him. The rule hadn't been his idea. District management had made that very clear. His job was simply to enforce it. Around 9:30, my first customer arrived. An elderly man named Walter slowly pushed a shopping cart toward the power tool section. He looked well into his 70s. He smiled and said, "Morning, my grandson wants to build a treehouse. I have absolutely no idea what I'm buying." I smiled back. "Well, let's figure it out together." For the next 30 minutes, we compared drills, circular saws, batteries, safety gear, and fasteners. Normally, these conversations happened at a small consultation table near the aisle. Customers could sit. Employees could sit. We could spread brochures across the table and explain everything comfortably. The table was still there. The chairs weren't. Walter looked around. "Where'd the seats go?" I answered honestly. "Company policy." He frowned. "That's strange." He leaned against the shopping cart while I continued explaining different drill models. After another 10 minutes, he sighed. I was hoping to sit for a minute. I'm sorry. You don't have any chairs in the whole store, not for customers in this department. He looked surprised. What about for employees? I smiled politely. We don't either. He stared at me. You're telling me you've been standing this whole time? Yes, sir. He shook his head. That's ridiculous. He bought everything anyway. Just over $2,000 worth of tools. Before leaving, he quietly said something I didn't forget. If a company doesn't care about its workers' needs, eventually it won't care about its customers either. At the time, I thought it was just something an old man said. A few days later, I realized he had predicted the future. Around noon, Lisa called me over the store radio. Daniel, customer service when you have a minute. When I arrived, I found a woman arguing with another employee. Not yelling. Just genuinely confused. She pointed toward an older customer waiting nearby with a walker. My father needs somewhere to sit while we finish financing this appliance. Lisa apologized. I'm sorry, we don't have seating anymore. The daughter blinked. What do you mean you don't have seating? Our company removed it? The woman actually laughed. I've been shopping here for 12 years. I know, so where do elderly customers wait? Lisa stayed professional. I'm afraid they have to remain standing. The daughter looked around the empty area. Then back at Lisa. You're serious? I am. She looked at her father. Then at the paperwork. Then she quietly closed the folder. We'll buy somewhere else. Lisa tried to help. We'd be happy to finish. No. The woman wasn't angry anymore. She sounded disappointed. If this company makes senior citizens stand while spending $3,000, it doesn't deserve my business. She took her father. They walked out. The entire customer service desk stayed silent for several seconds. Nobody said anything. Because everyone knew exactly what had just happened. The company had just lost a sale. Over 2 chairs. That afternoon, Mike received an email. District management wanted updates on how employees were adapting to the new appearance standards. Mike read it twice before muttering under his breath. They're asking whether morale has improved. Carlos overheard him. Tell them my feet say no. Even Mike laughed. But he didn't send that reply. Instead, he typed something diplomatic. Staff continues adjusting to new operational expectations. Corporate replied with one sentence. Excellent, maintain compliance. That phrase became our unofficial joke. Every inconvenience. Every complaint. Every sore muscle. Someone would shrug and say, maintain compliance. By Friday, things became physically noticeable. Emily wore a knee brace. Jordan bought expensive insoles. Lisa started icing her ankles every evening after work. I wasn't much better. By the end of every shift, my lower back felt stiff. Not because I was working harder. Because I wasn't allowed to recover between customers. The strange part was that productivity actually dropped. Standing all day sounds active. In reality, people move slower when they're exhausted. Simple tasks took longer. Employees avoided unnecessary trips across the store. Nobody volunteered to help another department. Energy disappeared. Exactly the opposite of what corporate claimed would happen. Then something happened that none of us expected. A customer complained about me. Mike called me into his office. I got a customer survey. I was confused. I thought everything went well. It did. He handed me the printed comment. I read it. Daniel was extremely knowledgeable and helpful, however, he looked exhausted and uncomfortable during our consultation. Watching him stand the entire time made me feel guilty for asking questions. I left earlier than I wanted because I felt like I was making him suffer. I looked up. Mike rubbed his forehead. That's the third survey this week saying basically the same thing. I almost laughed. So standing makes us look less professional, he nodded slowly. I know. For the first time since the policy started, Mike admitted what everyone already knew. This isn't working. But knowing something isn't working, and convincing corporate, are two very different things. The following Monday, district leadership announced they would be visiting our store to see how successful the new policy had been. Everyone suddenly became nervous. Not because we planned to break the rules. Quite the opposite. We were about to follow them perfectly. And none of us realized that one very important visitor would arrive at exactly the wrong moment. Monday morning felt different. Not because the rule had changed. Because everyone knew district leadership was coming. Whenever executives visited, stores magically became perfect. Shelves were straight. Floors were spotless. Employees smiled a little harder. Managers walked a little faster. Normally, people tried to create the best possible impression. This time, we didn't need to pretend. All we had to do was follow the policy exactly as written. Around 10 o'clock, 3 people walked through the front entrance. Our district manager, Karen. A regional operations director named Steven. And someone I had never seen before. He introduced himself as Ryan. I'm observing customer experience for corporate. That sentence immediately explained everything. Corporate wanted proof that their new policy was working. Mike greeted them with a smile. Karen looked around the sales floor. I like how open everything feels. Steven nodded. No unnecessary furniture, looks clean. None of us said a word. They wanted clean. They had clean. About 15 minutes later, I noticed a young couple walking toward appliances. They had a notebook full of measurements and pictures. Home renovation customers. Exactly the kind that usually spent a lot of money. The husband smiled. We're remodeling our kitchen. The wife added, this is our forever home, so we're trying to get everything right. I welcomed them and started explaining different appliance packages. Refrigerators. Wall ovens. Dishwashers. Cooktops. The conversation was detailed. They had dozens of questions. Normally, I would invite them to sit at the consultation table while we compared financing options. Instead, we all remained standing. After 20 minutes, the wife shifted her weight. Do you mind if we sit somewhere while we look through these brochures? I'm sorry, I said, there aren't any chairs available. She looked around. Really, company policy? The husband laughed. I've never been in a store without seating. I'm afraid neither have I. He smiled politely, but I could see the frustration growing. We continued another 10 minutes. Then his wife quietly whispered something to him. He nodded. He turned back to me. You've been fantastic. Thank you. But we're getting tired. I understand. We're going to grab lunch and think about everything. I already knew what that meant. People who leave during a major purchase rarely come back. They thanked me again. Then they walked out. Karen had watched the entire interaction from the next aisle. She walked over. Why didn't they buy? I answered honestly. They wanted somewhere to sit while making their decision. Stephen immediately replied, "Customers don't need chairs to shop." I simply nodded. "No, sir." Ryan, the corporate observer, wrote something in his notebook. Nobody said another word. About an hour later, another opportunity arrived. A local contractor entered with 2 employees. I recognized him immediately. His company renovated office buildings all over the county. Whenever he came in, he usually spent $10,000 or $15,000 at a time. He waved. "Daniel. Good to see you. I've got a big project." Perfect. Exactly the type of customer every retail manager wanted. For almost 40 minutes, we reviewed materials. Lumber. Fasteners. Commercial lighting. Power equipment. Paint supplies. His shopping cart kept getting fuller. Then he stopped talking. He stretched his back. "You got somewhere we can sit while we review the final numbers? I'm sorry." "No chairs?" "No, sir." He looked surprised. "You serious?" "Yes." He looked toward Karen and Stephen, who were still touring nearby. Then back at me. "I've been buying from this store for years." "I know. This is the first time I've ever been uncomfortable spending money." He laughed awkwardly. "That's a weird business strategy." I didn't respond. Instead, I followed policy. "Exactly." He eventually said, "Forget it, email me the quote." "I can do that. If it's easier, I'll probably order through your competitor." "I understand." He shook my hand. "This isn't your fault." Then he left. Karen's smile had completely disappeared. She quietly asked Mike, "How much business does that customer usually do?" Mike answered honestly. "Several $100,000 a year." Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Ryan slowly wrote another note in his notebook. The rest of the visit became noticeably quieter. Executives stopped complimenting the store's appearance. Instead, they started watching customers. Really watching them. They noticed people leaning on shopping carts. Older customers searching for somewhere to rest. Parents sitting on display furniture because there were no waiting areas. Employees constantly shifting from foot to foot. The policy looked good from across the room. Up close, it looked exhausting. Around 3 that afternoon, something unexpected happened. Emily suddenly grabbed the edge of a display shelf. I was only 2 aisles away. "You okay?" She forced a smile. "Just got dizzy." Mike immediately walked over. "You need water?" "I'm fine." She wasn't. She'd been standing for nearly 7 hours. Mike quietly told her, "Go sit in the break room for 10 minutes. Emily looked uncomfortable. "I can't." "Why not? If corporate sees me?" Mike looked across the store. Ryan was standing less than 30 feet away. Emily stayed exactly where she was. She wasn't afraid of getting tired. She was afraid of breaking policy. Ryan watched the entire exchange. For the first time all day, he stopped writing. Instead, he asked Mike a simple question. "Employees aren't even allowed to sit if they feel faint." Mike answered carefully, "The written policy doesn't include exceptions unless they're medically documented." Ryan looked genuinely surprised. I didn't realize it was being enforced that literally. Mike gave a tired smile. "We're maintaining compliance." Ryan recognized the phrase immediately. "You've said that 3 times today." Mike looked him straight in the eye. "Because that's exactly what we're doing." That evening, after the executives left, everyone felt hopeful. Surely, after seeing everything firsthand, corporate would reverse the policy. Instead, the next morning, another email arrived. Excellent compliance observed during district visit. Continue enforcing the standing policy consistently across all departments. The break room went completely silent. Carlo slowly folded the paper. They actually think yesterday went well. Nobody answered. Because nobody could explain it. Corporate had watched customers leave. Watched employees struggle. Watched sales disappear. And somehow, they called it a success. That's when I stopped expecting common sense to fix the problem. If they wanted perfect compliance, they were about to get something even better. And 3 days later, one VIP customer would unknowingly turn that decision into the most expensive mistake corporate had made all year. 3 days passed. Nothing changed. The emails kept coming. Maintain compliance. Professional appearance. Visible energy. Every message sounded as if it had been written by someone who had never spent a single day working on a sales floor. By Thursday morning, everyone had stopped complaining. Not because we accepted the rule. Because there was nothing left to say. We simply followed it. Exactly. Around 10 o'clock, Mike hurried across the store looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. He stopped beside me. I need you in appliances. Big customer, the biggest. I followed him across the store. Standing near the entrance was a group of 6 people wearing shirts with the logo of a regional property development company. I recognized the name immediately. They were building several luxury apartment complexes across the state. Mike leaned closer and lowered his voice. If this deal goes through, it'll be the biggest commercial sale we've had this year. He introduced me to the group leader. A man named Richard. Richard shook my hand. We're furnishing over 100 apartment units. I smiled. Then you've come to the right place. For the next hour, we discussed everything. Kitchen appliances. Laundry equipment. Extended warranties. Bulk pricing. Delivery schedules. Installation timelines. Richard asked smart questions. His project manager took detailed notes. Their accountant checked financing options. It was exactly the kind of meeting that required patience. Normally, we'd reserve the small consultation room. But after the new policy, its chairs had been removed too. So all 7 of us stood around a table covered with catalogs. 40 minutes passed. Then 50. An hour. Richard finally smiled. I think we're close. Mike quietly gave me a thumbs up from across the department. Everything was going perfectly. Then Richard looked around. Mind if we sit while we review the final contract? The question hung in the air. I already knew the answer. I'm sorry. There isn't anywhere to sit. He laughed. No, seriously. I am serious. He looked around the showroom. Conference room, no chairs. Break room, employees only. Office removed. His smile slowly disappeared. You mean your company expects customers to stand through a contract this large? Yes, sir. One member of his team rubbed her lower back. I've been standing since we got here. Another checked his watch. We've been here over an hour. Richard looked directly at Mike. Is this temporary? Mike answered honestly. No. It's company policy. Richard crossed his arms. I don't understand. Mike didn't argue. Neither did I. We simply explained the policy exactly as written. Nothing more. Nothing less. Richard looked at his team. What do you think? The accountant answered first. If they don't have a place for us to comfortably review paperwork, What happens if we ever need warranty support? Nobody had an answer. Richard slowly closed the pricing folder. I like your staff. He looked at me. You've been excellent. Then he looked at Mike. But this doesn't inspire confidence. Mike stayed silent. Richard continued. We're about to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. I understand. If your company cuts corners on something this basic. He gently pushed the folder back toward me. I'm not comfortable trusting them with the rest. My stomach dropped. Mike's face turned pale. Richard extended his hand. I appreciate your time. I'm sorry we couldn't earn your business. So am I. Then the entire group walked toward the exit. Nobody chased them. Nobody argued. Because there was nothing to argue about. They weren't leaving because of price. They weren't leaving because of product quality. They weren't leaving because of service. They were leaving because nobody was allowed to sit down. The automatic doors closed behind them. The store became completely silent. Mike immediately called the district manager. I couldn't hear the entire conversation. Only pieces. Yes. They walked. No, service wasn't the issue. Yes. The seating policy. Then Mike stopped talking. He simply listened. Finally, he answered. We followed the policy exactly. He hung up. A few minutes later, Karen arrived. She looked frustrated before she even entered the building. She walked straight into Mike's office. The door stayed closed nearly 40 minutes. Nobody knew what was happening inside. Rumors spread across the store. Corporates blaming Mike. They think we handled the customer wrong. They're sending HR. Nobody knew the truth. Late that afternoon, Mike finally walked out. He looked exhausted. Carlos quietly asked, "How bad is it?" Mike forced a tired smile. "They want written statements from everyone involved." Lisa frowned. "Why?" "They're investigating why the sale failed." I almost laughed. "We already know." Mike nodded. "I know. But they want documentation." "Perfect. Documentation." Corporate loved documentation. That evening, every employee who had interacted with Richard wrote a statement. Mine was only 1 page long. Every sentence was factual. No opinions. No sarcasm. No emotion. Just times. Events. Questions. And one sentence that appeared 4 different times. I followed company standing policy exactly as instructed. The next morning, HR arrived. Not one representative. 3. They spent hours interviewing employees. The questions became strangely repetitive. Did anyone refuse customer service? No. Did anyone tell the customer to leave? No. Was anyone rude? No. Did anyone violate company policy? No. Every answer led to the same conclusion. The employees had done exactly what management demanded. By late afternoon, one HR representative quietly asked me something unexpected. If there had been chairs available. I answered before she finished. They would have signed. She looked down at her notebook. I thought so. As she walked away, I realized something important. For the first time since this whole mess began, corporate wasn't trying to prove we were wrong. They were trying to figure out who was responsible. And judging by the expressions on the executives' faces, the next meeting wasn't going to be about employees anymore. It was going to be about the people who had written the policy in the first place. The following Tuesday, every store manager in the district received an unexpected email. The subject line simply read, Mandatory executive review. Nobody knew exactly what that meant. But everyone knew it had something to do with the contract we had lost. Mike left early that morning for the district office. The rest of us worked another normal shift. Or at least, as normal as standing for 9 hours could be. Around lunchtime, Carlos looked over at me and said, "So, think today changes anything?" I shrugged. I stopped trying to predict corporate weeks ago. We both laughed. Then we went back to work. Late that afternoon, Mike walked back into the store. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry either. He looked relieved. He gathered everyone in the break room. About 30 of us stood there, exactly as we'd been forced to do every day. Mike looked around the room. Then he smiled for the first time in weeks. "They're bringing the chairs back." Nobody reacted. For a second, I honestly thought people hadn't heard him. Then Lisa blinked. "Wait. What?" Mike laughed. "The policy is over." Carlos spoke first. "Completely," Mike nodded. "Effective immediately." Jordan folded his arms. "So what changed?" Mike held up a folder. "Our written statements." He placed the folder on the table. Every employee documented the exact same thing. We followed the policy. Exactly. No shortcuts. No exceptions. No arguments. Exactly as instructed. The room stayed quiet. Mike continued, "The executive review lasted almost 5 hours. The HR investigation found no employee misconduct. No manager misconduct. No customer service failures. The investigation concluded that the policy itself directly contributed to lost sales, lower customer satisfaction, increased employee fatigue, and the loss of the commercial contract." Emily smiled. "So we were right." Mike nodded. "We were." Then he added something that surprised everyone. The regional vice president admitted they relied on consultant recommendations instead of feedback from people actually working in stores. Carlos couldn't help himself. "So they paid someone to make the company worse." A few people laughed. Even Mike. "Apparently." Then he became serious again. The consultant's report focused on appearances. It never measured customer behavior. It never measured employee fatigue. And it never measured whether standing actually improved sales. It didn't. Not even close. The numbers told the real story. During the 3 weeks of the standing policy, average customer consultation time had dropped. Large purchases had declined. Customer complaints had increased. Employee sick days had increased. Online reviews mentioning uncomfortable shopping experiences had doubled. And, of course, the company had lost the largest commercial contract of the quarter. Not because another store offered better prices. Not because another company had better products. Because another company offered something incredibly complicated. Chairs. The next morning, maintenance workers returned. This time, they weren't removing furniture. They were bringing it back. One by one, the stools returned behind customer service. The consultation chairs came back. The employee seats reappeared. It almost looked like nothing had ever happened. Except everyone appreciated those chairs a lot more than before. Around noon, an elderly customer walked into my department. He smiled when he saw the consultation table. "Oh, good. The chairs are back." I smiled. "Yes, sir." He sat down. "So somebody finally came to their senses." "You could say that." We spent nearly 45 minutes reviewing lawn equipment. He bought everything. Before leaving, he shook my hand. I almost went somewhere else after my last visit. I'm glad you came back. So am I. That single conversation reminded me why the entire policy had failed. People don't spend thousands of dollars when they feel rushed. Comfort creates confidence. Confidence creates sales. A week later, something unexpected happened. Richard called the store. The same developer who had walked away from the contract. He asked for me personally. Daniel speaking. I heard your company changed the policy. We did. Good. There was a brief pause. We'd like another meeting. This time, the consultation room had chairs. Everyone sat down. We reviewed every detail carefully. Nobody rushed. Nobody stood shifting from one foot to the other. Nobody looked exhausted. Almost 3 hours later, Richard signed the contract. Before leaving, he smiled. You know, it wasn't really about the chairs. I looked at him. It was about respect. If a company respects people's comfort, it usually respects everything else too. That sentence stayed with me. A month later, corporate quietly introduced another change. Before any nationwide workplace policy could be approved, store employees had to test it first. Real feedback became mandatory. Management called it an operational improvement process. Employees called it something else. Common sense. Looking back, I never argued with the standing policy. I never refused an order. I never broke a single rule. I simply followed every instruction exactly as written. Sometimes the fastest way to prove a bad policy is a bad policy, is to let it work exactly the way its creators intended. And that's the funny thing about common sense. The people closest to the work usually have the most of it. The people writing the rules don't always have a chair to sit in while making them.